The salvage ring charged a docking fee that cost more than the ship itself, which felt appropriate. The transaction terminal even hesitated before approving the purchase, as if embarrassed to be involved. 1 credit transferred. Ownership confirmed. Somewhere in the station, a clerk laughed so hard he spilled recycled coffee on a customs form. The ship did not react. That was the first strange thing. Most derelicts responded to new ownership with something. An error tone, a light flicker, a final insult from a dying AI. This one accepted the transfer in absolute silence, like a cat pretending not to notice you had entered the room. The protagonist stood in the airlock for several seconds, waiting for a hiss, a warning, anything. Nothing happened. Eventually, the door opened, not smoothly, but not broken either. It was the kind of motion that suggested the ship had decided to cooperate. Inside, gravity held steady without being asked, which was already suspicious. He walked forward, boots echoing just enough to be annoying, and muttered that for 1 credit he had expected at least 1 floating wrench or a small fire. The lights came on in sections, never all at once, and never before he needed them. It felt less like illumination and more like reluctant assistance. He talked to the ship because talking to empty corridors had kept him sane before, and because silence made people imagine expensive problems. He joked about resale value, about how he would turn it into a cafe if the engines were gone, about how it probably missed the glory days. A panel slid shut behind him with a soft click, very much on purpose. He decided to take that as a laugh. The bridge did not look impressive. Consoles were dark. The command chair was present but unimpressed. He sat anyway because sitting in a command chair was mandatory when one bought a warship, even a mocked one. The interface did not activate. He tapped it. He apologized for tapping. He promised not to spill anything. A single line of text appeared, faint and outdated, hovering just above the console. Input acknowledged. "That's good," he said. "I acknowledge you acknowledging me." The text vanished. A pause followed that was just long enough to be uncomfortable, the kind that made negotiations fail and friendships end. Then the ship rerouted auxiliary power without explanation. A diagnostic began running itself, skipping sections as if offended by the implication they might be damaged. Numbers scrolled, paused, corrected themselves. He leaned back. "You know," he said, "if you're about to explode, I'd appreciate a warning, professional courtesy." The ship did not explode. Instead, a hatch opened nearby and closed again, slowly, deliberately, like someone checking if he was still paying attention. He laughed because at that point the alternative was screaming. The ring outside continued its noisy commerce, vendors shouting about weapons, legality loopholes, and antimatter warranties. None of them noticed the ship quietly adjusting its internal power ratios, waking systems that had not drawn current in centuries. None of them noticed that the warship, officially categorized as debris, had just completed a recognition protocol. On the bridge, a presence settled, not heavy, not loud, simply there. The air felt more organized. The silence felt intentional. "You are late," a voice said calmly, not from speakers, but from everywhere they would have been if the ship cared about such things. He blinked. "I had to find 1 credit," he replied. "That takes time." Another pause, then almost thoughtfully, "That is acceptable." He grinned despite himself. Whatever he had bought for 1 credit, it definitely wasn't scrap. The ship had been ignoring him for 3 hours, which was impressive considering it had the processing power of a small moon and the emotional maturity of an elderly librarian. Every request he made, status report, system map, even a polite "hello again," was met with silence so refined it felt curated. He paced the corridor, counting steps, then stopped because the floor lighting adjusted just enough to suggest he was walking incorrectly. "I'm not doing this wrong on purpose," he said. "This is just how I walk." "That explains several things," the voice replied. He froze. "Ah, so you can hear me." "I can hear most things," it said. "I simply do not respond to all of them. This is considered manners where I come from." "Where you come from has interesting manners." "Yes, your civilization tends to mistake noise for relevance." A section of the bulkhead folded inward, not dramatically, not threateningly, just enough to reveal her. She stood as if she had always been there, and the universe had simply failed to notice until now. At first glance, she could have passed for human, which was clearly intentional. The illusion broke in details that refused to align. The faint shimmer beneath her skin like light remembered rather than reflected, eyes that caught angles incorrectly, and the subtle ridges along her temples that shifted hue when she focused on him. She tilted her head, assessing, not curious so much as thorough. He cleared his throat. "Hi." "Hello," she replied. "You are smaller than anticipated." "Everyone says that." What? She stepped forward, her movement precise, economical, as if wasted motion offended her personally. "You are not the first to acquire this vessel," she said. "You are the first to speak to it as if it were listening." What? "Well," he said, "it was listening." She considered this. "Yes, against my better judgment." They walked together, though he wasn't sure when walking had been decided. The ship adjusted itself around them, corridors shifting, systems rerouting without announcement. He noticed that nothing creaked. For something supposedly ancient, it behaved like it had never been allowed to age. "You waited," he said. "A long time." "I waited correctly," she replied. "Waiting is an art. Your species treats it as a failure state." He laughed. "We're bad at patience. We invented fast food and panic buying." "That explains your history," she said calmly. They reached a chamber that should have been empty. It was. Energy folded into patterns that suggested weapons without displaying them, power without advertising it. He whistled softly. "So this is why everyone ignored you." "Yes," she said. "Visibility invites theft. Obsolescence invites neglect. Neglect provides peace." He glanced at her and me. "You noticed decay and assumed survival," she said. "That is uncommon." "Lucky me." She studied him again, longer this time. The ridges along her temples shifted, settling into a color he suspected meant approval or perhaps mild concern. "I am bound to respond to recognition," she said. "Not authority, not command." "Good," he said. "I'm terrible at commanding." She almost smiled. The ship began training him without asking permission, which felt consistent with its personality. One moment he was drinking something that claimed to be tea. The next the floor shifted, gravity tilted slightly, and a console slid into reach with the confidence of someone who had done this to far more competent beings. "Is this a test?" he asked, steadying himself. "No," she replied, "this is courtesy. I'm starting to think we define that word differently." "You are starting to think correctly." Data bloomed across the interface, not dumped, not forced, but paced. The ship seemed to wait for his eyes, for his breathing, adjusting the flow when his attention drifted. When he missed something important, it looped back casually like it hadn't noticed. When he understood something quickly, it skipped ahead with what could only be described as restrained approval. "This is a lot," he said. "This is very little," she answered. "I am being gentle." Terrifying. A simulated alert flared suddenly, sharp and red, and he flinched. The ship powered down half the display immediately. "That was unnecessary," she said. "You did that on purpose." "Yes. Why? To observe how you respond to danger." "And you apologized to the console." He shrugged. "It startled me." "That is not why." They ran combat scenarios that never escalated into combat. Every potential strike ended one step before impact, every weapon system stopping just shy of activation. When he asked why, she replied that destruction was boring and precision was more informative. The ship agreed, rerouting power away from anything flashy and into systems that bent probability just enough to be rude. Outside the salvage ring, something noticed. Long-range sensors lit up with passive scans, then active ones that pretended to be accidental. The ship ignored them with practiced elegance. "They're curious," he said. "They are greedy," she corrected. "Curiosity asks questions." A warning chimed, polite but firm. A patrol vessel pinged them, demanding identification in a tone that assumed the answer would be simple and unimportant. "Should I answer?" he asked. She considered. "Only if you wish to disappoint them." He grinned, "Always." The reply that went out was technically compliant and completely useless, full of outdated registry codes and ownership clauses that no longer existed. The patrol vessel paused, recalculated, and asked again, louder. The ship responded by increasing shielding by exactly 1%. "Subtle," he said. "I am restraining myself." The patrol left shortly after, convinced they had encountered either a malfunction or paperwork, both of which were terrifying in their own way. The ship relaxed, power levels settling. "You could have destroyed them," he said quietly. "Yes. But you didn't." "I am not awake for revenge," she said. "I am awake for balance." He nodded, absorbing that, and me. "You are inconvenient," she replied, "and therefore useful." High praise. She paused, then said, "Yes." The ship drifted free of the ring hours later, unnoticed by those who mattered least. As the stars shifted and old systems stretched awake, he realized the galaxy had not gained a weapon. It had regained a memory. By the time the first modern fleet arrived, the ship had already decided how the encounter would end. It did not announce this. It merely adjusted internal priorities, dimmed unnecessary lights, and brewed something that might have been tea again. He had learned not to ask. "They're blocking 3 vectors," he said, watching tactical projections rearrange themselves without ever settling into anything aggressive. "That seems excessive." "They are nervous," she replied. "Nervousness scales poorly with firepower." "Should I be nervous?" She considered. "You are making jokes. This suggests optimism or denial. Both are acceptable." The fleet hailed them. The message was formal, authoritative, and heavy with the assumption that compliance was the natural state of the universe. He listened, waited, then looked at her. "Any advice?" "Yes," she said. "Do not sound impressed." He was. He responded calmly, truthfully, and with just enough ambiguity to be irritating. He explained that they were in transit, that ownership was legitimate, and that no hostile action was planned unless provoked by something foolish. The silence that followed was long enough to be satisfying. The fleet recalibrated, scans intensified, weapons armed just a fraction too loudly. "They're going to try something," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "They always do. This is how they learn." The ship did not fire. It folded space instead, gently bending trajectories so that targeting solutions unraveled themselves. A missile test vanished, reappearing neatly back in its launcher with a polite diagnostic error. Communications scrambled just enough to cause confusion but not panic. The fleet froze, suddenly aware that escalation was optional and survival was not guaranteed. A new message came through, less confident, more respectful. "That worked," he said. "It usually does," she replied. "Violence is inefficient when embarrassment is available." The fleet withdrew, slowly, carefully, as if backing away from an old animal they had mistaken for dead. When the stars settled back into their proper places, the ship powered down the more theatrical systems. Silence returned, comfortable this time. "You could have taken control," he said. "You didn't." "I do not rule," she said. "I correct." He nodded. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped feeling like a passenger. He knew where things were now. He knew when the ship was thinking. He even knew when she was amused, which was rarer than he liked but more frequent than she admitted. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "we go where we are not expected, we wait where we are not watched, we intervene when it matters." "And me? What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "we go where we are not expected, we wait where we are not watched, we intervene when it matters." "And me?" "You will continue to see value," she said, "and occasionally make poor jokes." "Those are essential." "Yes," she agreed, "I have accounted for them." They left no wake worth following, no signal worth chasing. To the galaxy, the encounter became a report anomaly, then a rumor, then an argument over whose sensors were faulty. Markets adjusted, patrols changed routes, assumptions cracked quietly. On the bridge, he sat in the command chair without ceremony. It fit better now. Not physically, though that too, but in the way things fit when they've stopped resisting. "Thank you," he said eventually. "For what?" "For waiting." She paused, then replied, "Thank you for noticing." The ship moved on, not as a relic reborn, not as a weapon unleashed, but as something far more disruptive. A remembered truth.